Richard Collins's morning always began the same way: silence, steel, and glass. The floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment looked out over Manhattan, a commanding view that most people could only dream about. But for Richard, it wasn't a dream, it was simply Tuesday. The city stretched beneath him like his own personal empire. He didn't sip coffee in chipped mugs, his was imported, brewed by a machine that cost more than some families' cars. His shirt cuffs were perfectly pressed, his wristwatch a sleek Swiss piece that flashed whenever he adjusted his tie. To Richard, appearances weren't just important, they were everything. Down on the streets below, life looked very different. In a small neighborhood on the outer edge of the city, Sam Walker was finishing his own morning routine. His apartment was nothing glamorous: 2 bedrooms in a building that had seen better days, pipes that rattled in winter, paint peeling in the hallway, but it was home. The smell of bacon drifted through the air as he fried breakfast for his teenage son, Michael. The kitchen table was scratched, the chairs mismatched, but they laughed as they ate, finding joy in small things. Sam's uniform, a navy janitor's shirt with his name stitched over the pocket, hung on a hook by the door. It wasn't tailored, but it was honest work, and he wore it with quiet dignity. By 7:30, Richard's chauffeured black car rolled up to the entrance of Collins Enterprises. Employees straightened their postures when he walked in, some out of respect, others out of fear. He liked it that way. In his mind, success meant commanding the room without effort. His stride was quick, his eyes sharp, and his voice clipped whenever he gave instructions. No one dared waste his time. He had meetings lined up, investments to oversee, people to impress. At almost the same moment, Sam was unlocking the supply closet in the same building, pushing a cart loaded with mops, buckets, and cleaning supplies. His shift started before most employees had settled into their desks. He moved quietly, sweeping lobbies and emptying trash bins, nodding politely to those who passed him without acknowledgement. For many, he was invisible, just part of the background. Yet Sam noticed everything: the way new interns nervously clutched their coffee, the way the receptionist forced a cheerful smile even on bad days, the way Richard Collins swept through the lobby as though the ground itself should be grateful he walked on it. Richard barely spared a glance at the janitor. If he did, it was with the same expression he reserved for faulty printers or smudged windows, an inconvenience that needed fixing. To him, people like Sam were proof of what happened when someone didn't push hard enough, didn't dream big enough. Richard told himself he respected hard work, but deep inside, he valued only results, and results meant money, influence, power. Meanwhile, Sam had a different measure of worth. For him, it was about responsibility. Every dollar he earned kept the lights on, kept food on the table, and helped his son through school. Michael wanted to play basketball at college one day, maybe even get a scholarship, and Sam was determined to support that dream, no matter how many nights he spent scrubbing floors or polishing brass railings. Sam didn't resent his job. He carried himself with a quiet strength, knowing that dignity wasn't found in what you wore but in how you treated people. Richard, sitting at the head of a glossy boardroom table, leaned back as his assistants clicked through a presentation. Charts rose and fell, numbers climbed, deals closed. Applause followed one particularly aggressive acquisition strategy. Richard smiled faintly, tapping his pen on the table. To him, it was another victory, another sign that he was untouchable. At that exact hour, Sam was kneeling in the lobby, polishing the marble floor until it gleamed. People walked over his work without noticing, heels clicking, shoes squeaking, some leaving scuff marks he'd later buff away again. He didn't mind. In fact, he found a strange peace in the rhythm of it, the quiet scrape of the mop, the shine left behind, the satisfaction of leaving something better than he found it. The two men lived in the same world but in different universes. Richard's life was all speed, strategy, and self-importance. Sam's was endurance, patience, and humility. Yet, though neither of them knew it yet, their lives were on a collision course. Later that evening, when Richard returned home, his penthouse greeted him with sterile perfection. Lights adjusted automatically, music played softly, and the refrigerator hummed as it dispensed sparkling water into a crystal glass. But the apartment was silent, except for his own footsteps. Emily, his daughter, was away at a school activity, and though Richard noticed the empty hallway to her room, he dismissed the thought quickly, turning instead to emails on his tablet. Sam, by contrast, returned to his small apartment to find Michael at the table, textbooks spread everywhere. Michael grinned when he saw his father, eager to tell him about the practice game he had won. Sam listened with full attention, clapping his son on the back, pride glowing in his tired eyes. They ate reheated leftovers together, but their laughter filled the room in a way chandeliers and city views never could. In the contrast of their nights, the truth was clear: Richard had everything money could buy, yet so little of what money couldn't. Sam had almost nothing by worldly standards, yet his world was rich with love and connection. Neither man thought about the other that night, but fate was already stitching a thread between them, one woven from arrogance, humility, and the kind of test that reveals who people truly are. The morning rush inside Collins Enterprises was always a performance of order and urgency. Employees hustled through the revolving doors, clutching lattes, their heels clicking on polished floors that gleamed under the lobby lights. Receptionists answered phones with rehearsed cheer, security guards nodded as familiar faces passed, and the hum of conversation filled the air. In the midst of this, Sam Walker pushed his cart slowly across the marble, mop handle balanced against his shoulder. His job was to make the building shine before the business world stormed in, but sometimes, with so many people moving, he had to adjust on the fly. On this particular morning, Richard Collins arrived earlier than usual. His chauffeur pulled up in the sleek black car, and the driver jumped out quickly to open the door. Richard stepped out wearing a charcoal suit that looked custom-tailored to perfection. He carried no briefcase; his assistant, just a few steps behind, carried everything he might need. Richard's stride was long and confident, his eyes fixed forward, not on the people around him but on the image in his head of another victory waiting in the boardroom. Sam was bent over, sliding the mop across a stubborn spot near the entrance. He glanced up briefly as the crowd shifted to let Richard through. The man radiated authority, the kind of presence that made others instinctively move out of the way. Sam stepped aside as best he could, but his cart squeaked awkwardly as a wheel stuck against the floor. He tugged at it just as Richard passed, and in that single moment, the mop handle slipped from Sam's grip and nudged against Richard's immaculate trouser leg. The world seemed to freeze. Conversations halted, footsteps slowed, and all eyes shifted toward Richard Collins. He stopped mid-stride, looking down at the faint wet streak near his cuff. Slowly, he lifted his gaze toward Sam, his expression hard and disbelieving, as though the very idea that a janitor could touch him was an insult to nature itself. "You've got to be kidding me," Richard said, his voice sharp, cutting through the lobby noise. He stepped back, inspecting the tiny spot as though it were a stain that ruined the entire suit. Sam's face flushed. He straightened quickly, holding the mop upright like a soldier caught in the wrong place. "I'm sorry, sir," he said quietly, his voice steady but soft. "It was an accident. I didn't see." Richard cut him off, his tone laced with disdain. "That suit is worth more than you make in a month. And you didn't see?" The lobby grew silent. Employees froze, pretending to check their phones or straighten papers, but really, everyone was watching. A few glanced at Sam with pity, others looked at Richard nervously, knowing he had a reputation for sharp words and an unforgiving nature. Sam lowered his eyes, gripping the mop tighter. "I'll take care of it right away, sir." "I'm sorry." Richard's assistant stepped in quickly, murmuring, "We should go upstairs, sir. The meeting's about to start." But Richard wasn't ready to move on. His pride demanded a demonstration. He leaned closer, his voice carrying enough volume that everyone nearby could hear. "People like you should pay attention to where you swing that stick. You're here to clean, not to cause problems. Do your job properly." The words stung, not because they were loud but because they were dismissive, stripping away Sam's dignity in front of an audience. Sam wanted to reply, to remind Richard that accidents happen to everyone, that respect costs nothing. But years of swallowing pride in order to keep work had taught him restraint. He bowed his head slightly. "Yes, sir," he murmured. Richard gave a final glare, then turned sharply toward the elevators. The crowd parted like water around him, and within moments, he disappeared behind gleaming steel doors. As the lobby slowly returned to life, whispers floated through the air. A young intern muttered under her breath, "That was uncalled for." Another worker shook his head, pity flickering in his eyes as he glanced at Sam. But no one spoke up. No one challenged the millionaire. Sam exhaled slowly, his hands trembling just enough that he had to steady the mop. He bent down and wiped at the faint streak, though the suit was long gone upstairs. His pride felt bruised, but he forced a small smile when one of the security guards gave him a sympathetic nod. He'd been through worse. He reminded himself why he worked, not for the approval of men like Richard Collins but for the boy waiting at home with dreams too big to be broken. Upstairs, Richard was already dismissing the incident from his mind. In the grand scheme of his morning, a janitor's clumsiness was nothing more than an annoyance, a speck on his otherwise polished image. He focused instead on the upcoming negotiations, calculating profits, weighing risks. He didn't think twice about the man downstairs whose hands were still wet with mop water. But for Sam, the moment lingered. As he wheeled his cart down another hallway, he felt the weight of the humiliation pressing against his chest. He replayed Richard's words, each one sharper than the last. Still, when he passed a young woman struggling with a stack of files, he stepped aside quickly to open the door for her. She smiled, surprised by the kindness. Sam nodded and moved on, carrying himself with quiet grace, refusing to let one man's arrogance define his day. That evening, as Richard sat in a restaurant with investors, his laugh echoing over glasses of expensive wine, Sam was back in his neighborhood, carrying groceries up 3 flights of stairs. Michael met him at the door, grinning as he waved a paper covered in red-inked praise from his teacher. "I got an A on my history essay, Dad," he exclaimed. Sam's face lit up with pride, and he hugged his son tightly, the sting of that morning fading under the warmth of the moment. In 2 different corners of the same city, the encounter replayed in opposite ways. For Richard, it was already forgotten, insignificant. For Sam, it became another quiet reminder that the world judged worth by the wrong measures. He had been looked down on because of his uniform, his position, his lack of wealth. Yet in his own home, his son's laughter proved that value was never about money, it was about love, resilience, and the kind of character that arrogance could never buy. The stage had been set. One man's pride had collided with another's humility, and though neither realized it, their paths were now tied together. The sting of words in the lobby was only the beginning of a story that would soon test the very core of who they were. Emily Collins sat cross-legged on her bed, her laptop open in front of her, earbuds tucked into her ears as soft music played. Around her, the room was decorated in warm pastels, with framed photos of vacations she barely remembered and expensive gifts that looked beautiful but meant little. Her shelves were lined with books she'd chosen herself, her escape into worlds far away from the polished, distant life her father provided. At 16, Emily had everything a teenager could ask for: designer clothes, the latest phone, a private school education, but what she wanted most was the one thing she rarely received: time with her dad. Richard was often gone before she woke up and came home long after she'd fallen asleep. When they did share the same space, conversation usually revolved around grades, manners, or future expectations. He loved her, she knew, but his way of loving was providing, not being present. Emily longed for the warmth she saw in other families, the kind that couldn't be measured in gifts or allowances. That afternoon, she sat at the dining table with her tutor, working through calculus problems. The massive chandelier sparkled above them, and the table stretched long enough to seat 20 guests. Yet only two people sat there, Emily, biting her pencil nervously, and her tutor, who clicked his pen against the textbook. "You're smart, Emily," he said, "but your focus drifts. Try again." She sighed, pressing her forehead into her palm. "It's just hard to care when Dad never asks me about this. He'll look at the grade, not the effort." Her tutor smiled sympathetically but said nothing. He'd seen this before in wealthy homes, kids desperate for attention that money couldn't buy. Meanwhile, across town in a modest apartment, Sam Walker set 2 bowls of macaroni and cheese on the kitchen table. Michael bounced in, sweaty from basketball practice, still wearing his school jersey. He plopped into a chair, grabbing his fork with enthusiasm. "Slow down," Sam chuckled, settling opposite him. "You'll choke before you taste it." Michael grinned. "Sorry, Dad. Coach said I'm getting better at defense. Maybe I'll start in the next game." His eyes lit up with excitement, and Sam couldn't help but beam with pride. "You will," Sam said firmly. "I've seen you work. You've got the heart for it." Michael ate quickly, then pulled out his homework. While he scribbled through equations, Sam washed dishes, the rhythm of clinking plates mixing with the scratching of a pencil. Their evenings were simple, predictable, and filled with small conversations that built a bond stronger than steel. Later, Michael leaned back, frustrated. "Math stinks," he muttered. Sam dried his hands and sat beside him. "Math's tough, yeah. But remember what we always say?" Michael rolled his eyes, smiling despite himself. "Do the hard things now, so life gets easier later." "That's right," Sam said, nudging his son's shoulder. "You keep pushing, you'll get where you want to go." Unlike Emily, Michael didn't have wealth cushioning his dreams. What he had was his father's constant encouragement, even on nights when Sam came home bone-tired from cleaning offices. And that consistency gave Michael a quiet confidence that Emily often wished she had. The next morning, Emily rode in the back of her father's car on the way to school. She tried to talk about an art project she was working on, something about community life and people who inspired her, but Richard was glued to his tablet, scanning emails. "That sounds good," he murmured, without looking up. Emily stared out the window, her enthusiasm deflating. She knew he wasn't really listening. In another part of the city, Michael jogged beside his father to the bus stop. Sam carried his lunch in a brown paper bag, joking that it was gourmet cuisine because it had 2 sandwiches instead of 1. Michael laughed, shaking his head. "You're crazy, Dad." "Crazy about you," Sam replied, giving his son a playful shove before the bus pulled up. "Go knock Em out at school." As the bus pulled away, Sam stood watching, pride swelling in his chest. He didn't have much money to give, but he gave Michael his presence, his time, and his encouragement. That afternoon, Emily attended a student council meeting where other kids shared stories of their parents volunteering at local events. She smiled politely but said little, embarrassed that she didn't have the same stories. She couldn't remember the last time her father had shown up at a school play or stayed through an entire sports game. At the same time, Michael's basketball team practiced in a worn-out gym, and Sam sat in the bleachers, cheering loudly. He clapped at every play, calling out encouragements, his voice carrying across the court. Michael pretended to roll his eyes, but his grin betrayed how much it meant to have his dad there. The contrast between their worlds grew sharper with every passing day. Emily had riches but loneliness, Michael had poverty but connection. Emily's dinners were often served by house staff in a quiet dining room, while Michael's meals were simple but shared with laughter. Emily's father expressed love through tuition payments and material comfort, while Michael's father expressed it through presents, hugs, and constant support. One evening, Emily tried again to connect with her father. She found him in his home office, typing furiously on his laptop. "Dad?" she asked softly, stepping inside. "Do you want to see the painting I've been working on?" Richard glanced up briefly, then back at his screen. Maybe later, sweetheart. I have a deadline tonight. Her heart sank. You always say later. Richard paused, hearing the tremor in her voice, but before he could respond, his phone buzzed with another call. He waved her off, mouthing, "We'll talk later." Emily left quietly, clutching her sketchbook, feeling smaller than ever in a house that seemed too big for one girl's loneliness. Meanwhile, in his small apartment, Sam sat with Michael on the couch, flipping through old family photos. They laughed at a picture of Michael missing his 2 front teeth, face smeared with chocolate. Sam wrapped an arm around his son. "You've grown so much. Your mom would be proud." Michael leaned against him, smiling. "You think I can really make it to college, Dad? Even if we don't have the money?" Sam kissed the top of his son's head. "We'll figure it out. Dreams are worth chasing. And I'll be with you every step." As the night fell over the city, 2 teenagers drifted off to sleep in 2 very different homes. One surrounded by wealth but longing for connection, the other surrounded by modesty but filled with love. Their fathers, worlds apart in status, were shaping their children in ways they didn't yet realize, Richard through absence, Sam through presence. What neither of them knew was that their children's lives would soon intersect in a way that would challenge everything both fathers believed about worth, love, and the meaning of family. Saturday mornings looked different for Emily than they did for her father. While Richard Collins usually spent the day reviewing reports or golfing with business partners, Emily often found excuses to leave the house. That weekend, she slipped into jeans and a sweatshirt, tied her hair back, and told the driver to take her to the community center downtown. It wasn't part of her school's curriculum, nor did her father know. Volunteering had become her secret, one small corner of life where she felt useful, seen, and connected to something beyond her family's penthouse walls. The center buzzed with activity. Kids played basketball in the gym, elderly women knitted scarves for charity drives, and volunteers stacked boxes of canned goods for the food pantry. Emily joined a group organizing donated clothes, folding shirts and jeans into neat piles. Nobody cared that she was a millionaire's daughter. To them, she was just Emily, another pair of hands helping out. Across the room, Sam Walker carried a crate of canned soup, setting it down with a grunt. He wiped his forehead and smiled at the woman running the pantry. "That should hold us through the week," he said. Sam wasn't on the clock here, he wasn't paid to mop floors or carry boxes, but he showed up every weekend because he believed in community. People had helped him when his wife passed away, when he struggled to raise Michael alone. Giving back felt less like charity and more like gratitude. Emily noticed him from across the room. She recognized his face vaguely. He worked in her father's building, but she couldn't place where. She only saw a man working tirelessly, his hands rough but steady, his eyes kind as he encouraged a little boy carrying a bag of rice half his size. "Good job, champ," Sam said warmly, ruffling the boy's hair. "Every little bit helps." Emily smiled to herself. Here was someone so different from her father, yet somehow more grounded, more human. That evening, at dinner, she gathered the courage to mention the volunteer work. "Dad, I helped at the food pantry today," she said, spearing a piece of asparagus on her fork. "It felt good. People really need it." Richard barely looked up from his phone. "That's nice, sweetheart. But you don't need to waste time there. Focus on your studies. Charity work is for people who don't have real goals." Emily's brow furrowed. "But it's not a waste." People were so grateful, and, Emily, Richard interrupted firmly, setting his phone down at last. "You're young. You don't understand. The world doesn't reward kindness, it rewards results. If you want to succeed, you can't spend your time handing out canned beans. That's what those people are there for, the ones who don't make it." His words landed heavy, sharper than he realized. Emily set down her fork, her appetite gone. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but experience told her it would only end in silence. So she retreated to her room, where she flipped open her sketchbook and began drawing what she had seen that morning: Sam smiling as he lifted boxes, children laughing with crumbs of donated cookies on their lips. She sketched the warmth of a place her father would never understand. Meanwhile, Sam walked home with Michael after volunteering. They stopped at the corner store for a soda, Michael chattering about a new play he wanted to try at the next basketball game. Sam listened with full attention, even though his body ached from carrying boxes all day. "That sounds like a winning move," he said with a grin. "You'll have to show me when we get to the park tomorrow." Michael kicked a pebble along the sidewalk. "Dad, why do you help there so much? I mean, we don't have a lot ourselves." Sam paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because son, no matter how little we have, there's always someone with less. And when we help, we're reminding them, and ourselves, that we're not alone. That's what community means." Michael nodded slowly, the lesson sinking in. The same night, Richard poured himself a glass of whiskey in his penthouse study. He replayed his daughter's words but dismissed them quickly. He saw charity as weakness, a distraction from ambition. To him, success was measured by bank accounts, not by compassion. He convinced himself he was teaching Emily how to survive in a cutthroat world. Yet beneath his certainty, a small, uncomfortable thought nagged at him: why did his daughter's eyes look so disappointed? Over the following weeks, Emily continued sneaking away to the community center. She helped with food drives, sorted coats for winter, and sometimes just played with the kids in the gym. She laughed more there than she did at home. Each time, she noticed Sam, always working, always encouraging, never complaining. Though she still didn't know his name, she admired him. He embodied the values her father dismissed: kindness, humility, and genuine care for others. Richard, on the other hand, doubled down on his philosophy. At a board meeting, one of his partners suggested donating to a local youth program. Richard scoffed. "Philanthropy doesn't build empires. Focus on profit margins." His colleagues nodded, some reluctantly, but no one dared challenge him. The irony was stark. In the same city, a janitor gave freely of his time while a millionaire clutched tightly to his wealth, convinced it defined him. Emily stood between those worlds, torn between the father she loved and the truth she was beginning to see: that compassion built bridges money never could. The contrast was growing sharper with every passing day, setting the stage for a moment when worlds of ego and humility would collide in ways none of them expected. The day of the school and community fundraiser dawned crisp and clear, the kind of spring afternoon that made even the busiest people slow down to breathe. Banners stretched across the entrance of Lincoln High School, welcoming families, neighbors, and volunteers to an event meant to bring everyone together. Booths lined the parking lot, selling homemade pies, crafts, and raffle tickets. The gymnasium had been transformed with balloons and colorful posters. Music played from speakers, kids darted between tables, and the smell of popcorn and hot dogs filled the air. Emily Collins had been looking forward to this day all week. She had convinced her driver to drop her off early, telling her father she was staying late for a school project. In reality, she wanted to spend time at the volunteer tables, stacking canned food donations and helping younger children with art activities. For once, she felt like she belonged to something real, not just the gilded cage of her family's wealth. She wore simple jeans and sneakers, blending in, her hair pulled into a ponytail. Nobody treated her differently. Nobody expected her to be perfect. Across the gym, Sam Walker was already at work, adjusting tables and hauling crates of bottled water from a truck. Michael jogged alongside him, grinning as he carried lighter boxes. "Careful," Sam warned with a smile. "Don't show off too much, you'll make your old man look bad." "You already look bad, Dad," Michael teased, and they both laughed. Sam loved these events, not because they were glamorous but because they showed the best of people. He caught sight of Emily on the far side of the room, kneeling with a group of kids to help them with finger painting. He recognized her faintly from the office building but didn't place her as Richard Collins's daughter. To him, she was just another teenager giving her time. He smiled approvingly, then turned back to his tasks. By early afternoon, the event was in full swing. Families milled about, raffle numbers were called, and the chatter of community filled the air. Richard, meanwhile, sat in a glass-walled conference room across town, locked in heated negotiations. He had brushed off Emily's mention of the fundraiser, telling himself she didn't need him there. She has everything she needs, he muttered as he signed contracts, convincing himself that money and success equaled love. Back at the school, Emily's laughter echoed as she guided children through a small obstacle course set up outside. Parents cheered from the sidelines, snapping photos on their phones. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. A screech of tires shattered the laughter. A car swerved at the edge of the parking lot, the driver losing control as the vehicle barreled toward the crowd. Panic erupted instantly. Parents screamed, children scattered, volunteers froze in shock. The car jumped the curb, heading straight for the section where Emily and a cluster of kids stood. Sam reacted before he even had time to think. Dropping the crate in his hands, he sprinted across the pavement, his legs moving faster than he thought possible. He reached Emily just as the car closed in. With one arm, he shoved two children out of harm's way. With the other, he grabbed Emily around the waist and yanked her clear of the oncoming vehicle. The car smashed into a table, sending debris flying, before screeching to a halt against a metal barrier. Silence fell for a split second, broken only by the sound of glass settling on the pavement. Then the cries rose again, people shouting for help, kids sobbing, adults rushing forward. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She realized she was lying on the ground, Sam's body half shielding her. His arm trembled as he pushed himself up, a scrape bleeding along his temple where he'd hit the pavement. "You okay, kid?" he asked, his voice strained but steady. Emily nodded shakily, tears welling in her eyes. "Why, yes. I think so." "You're safe," Sam said, helping her sit up. Around them, people began crowding, some rushing to the driver of the car, who was slumped over the wheel, others gathering the frightened children. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Michael appeared out of nowhere, panic written across his face. "Dad," he cried, kneeling beside him. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Sam assured quickly, though his arm throbbed and his ribs ached from the dive. His focus was on Emily, who looked pale and shaken. "Stay with her," he told Michael. "Make sure she's okay." Emily clung to Michael's hand, her breath ragged. "He saved me," she whispered, staring at Sam in awe. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, weaving through the crowd. They checked on Emily, confirming she had no serious injuries beyond a few bruises. They cleaned the cut on Sam's forehead and insisted on taking him for X-rays, but he refused at first until Michael pleaded with him to go. Finally, he agreed, climbing into the ambulance reluctantly. Emily sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, trembling as the reality of what had just happened sank in. She kept glancing toward the ambulance, tears streaking her cheeks. She wanted to call her father, but she knew he would be angry that she hadn't told him she was here. Still, the fear in her chest pushed her to dial his number. Richard answered on the third ring, irritation in his voice. "Emily, I'm in a meeting. Can this wait?" Her voice cracked. "Dad, there was an accident." A car, the sound of her crying pierced through his irritation instantly. His heart seized. "What? What happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," she sobbed, "but someone saved me. He got hurt because of me." Richard shot to his feet, startling the executives at the table. "Cancel everything," he barked, already striding out. His driver rushed to meet him downstairs. For the first time in years, business meant nothing. Only his daughter mattered. When he arrived at the hospital, he found Emily sitting in the waiting room, still wrapped in the blanket. She ran into his arms, clinging to him. He held her tightly, his eyes wet though he tried to hide it. "Thank God you're safe," he whispered, kissing her hair. "Dad," Emily said softly, looking up at him. "It was the janitor. From your building. He pulled me away. He saved me." Richard froze, the words sinking in like a stone dropped into deep water. The janitor. The man he had humiliated just days before. He glanced toward the emergency room doors, where nurses moved briskly in and out. Guilt rose in his chest, heavy and suffocating. Moments later, he saw Sam being wheeled out, a bandage on his forehead, his arm in a sling. Michael walked beside him protectively. Richard stared, his throat tightening. He remembered the mop, the words he'd thrown like knives, the disdain in his own voice. And now here was that same man, injured because he had risked everything to save Emily. For the first time in a long while, Richard Collins, the millionaire who believed kindness was weakness, felt utterly powerless. The ambulance doors closed with a sharp hiss, leaving Emily and Michael standing in the hospital corridor. The fluorescent lights reflected off the polished linoleum floors, and the distant hum of machines and footsteps created an almost surreal soundtrack to the chaos of the day. Emily held tightly to Michael's hand, her knuckles white, her mind racing. She had never felt fear so sharp, so immediate. And yet, somehow, there was relief in knowing Sam was in good hands. Inside the emergency room, Sam Walker was being attended by nurses who worked quickly, checking his vitals, cleaning his forehead cut, and securing his arm in a sling. Despite the pain, Sam's thoughts were only on Emily. He had acted instinctively, without regard for himself, and the adrenaline had only now begun to fade, leaving soreness and a deep, gnawing ache in his chest. Richard Collins arrived shortly after, stepping into the emergency room with a mix of urgency and disbelief. The first thing he noticed was Sam, this man he had treated with cold indifference, this janitor he had dismissed in the lobby days before. And now, here he was, lying on a stretcher, bandaged and weary, having saved Richard's daughter from what could have been a fatal accident. Richard's chest tightened, guilt pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't lift. He had chased wealth, influence, and the illusion of control for so long that he had forgotten the value of humanity. Yet now, all the numbers, contracts, and meetings in the world seemed meaningless compared to the man in front of him. Emily ran forward, her eyes wide and filled with tears. "Mr. Walker," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. "You saved me." Sam smiled faintly, wincing as he adjusted his sling. "You're okay," he said, his voice still steady despite the discomfort. "That's what matters." Richard stepped closer, his normally commanding voice softened. I don't know what to say," he admitted, feeling entirely exposed. "I treated you poorly before, and now I owe you everything." Sam shook his head gently. "There's nothing to owe, sir. I did what anyone would do if they could." His humility was unwavering, even in the face of the man whose ego could fill a room. Emily's grip on Michael's hand tightened. "Dad, you see now, right? Not everything can be measured in money." Richard swallowed hard, the reality settling over him like a cold fog. His daughter's life had been saved by someone he had deemed insignificant, a man whose worth he had never recognized. The stark contrast between arrogance and humility had never been clearer, and the lesson hit harder than any business failure ever could. A nurse approached, checking Sam's vitals once more. "You'll need to stay under observation for a few hours," she said. "No heavy lifting for the next week, and rest your arm." Sam nodded. "Understood," he replied. He glanced at Emily again, the warmth in his eyes reflecting genuine concern rather than obligation. "You're safe now, kid. That's what counts." Richard stepped closer, his hand hovering uncertainly. "Sam, please, call me Richard," he said quietly, his pride taking a tentative back seat. I need to thank you properly." Sam's brow lifted slightly, surprised at the rare vulnerability in the millionaire's tone. "Richard, really, it's not necessary. I just did what I had to do." Richard shook his head. "No, it is necessary. I was wrong. About you. About a lot of things." He paused, searching for words that might bridge the gap between worlds. I want to make this right." Emily watched the exchange, her heart swelling with hope. She had always known that money didn't guarantee goodness, but seeing her father acknowledge his mistake gave her faith in the possibility of change. "Dad," she whispered, "it's not just about money or power. It's about recognizing people for who they are, and what they do for others." Sam nodded slowly, understanding that this was the true lesson of the day. "I've worked all my life without expecting recognition," he said. "But seeing your daughter safe, that's reward enough." Michael tugged at Sam's sleeve. "Dad, you were amazing," he said proudly. "You saved her." Sam ruffled his son's hair, smiling despite the pain. "We all do what we can," he replied. "Sometimes it's scary, sometimes it hurts, but we step up anyway. That's what matters." Richard felt a sharp pang in his chest, a mixture of guilt, gratitude, and awakening. The barriers he had built between himself and the world were crumbling, and for the first time, he realized that life wasn't about being untouchable or in control. It was about connection, empathy, and the courage to do the right thing. Over the next few hours, doctors monitored Sam carefully. Emily and Michael stayed by his side, chatting quietly, keeping his spirits up, and listening to his stories of long nights cleaning offices, of sacrifices made to keep his family afloat, and of simple joys that money could never buy. Richard listened too, absorbing the reality of a life lived with integrity and care, realizing that wealth alone could never instill such values. By the evening, Sam was cleared to go home with precautions. Richard insisted on driving him personally, escorting him through the city streets in a sleek black car that had once been a symbol of status, but now seemed to carry a different meaning: protection, respect, and acknowledgement of human worth beyond social class. During the drive, Richard broke the silence. "Sam, I can't change the past. But I want to support you, your family, in any way I can. I don't know how else to say thank you." Sam smiled faintly. "Richard, you've already said it. Just treat people with respect. That's all any of us really need." Emily leaned against her father's arm, feeling the warmth of reconciliation between two worlds she had longed to connect. "See, Dad? This is what matters," she whispered. "Kindness. Presence. Being there for someone when it counts." Richard nodded, tears welling in his eyes. He finally understood what he had missed all these years, that money, influence, and control meant little if they weren't paired with compassion, humility, and moral courage. Arriving at Sam's apartment, Richard insisted on carrying the lighter groceries inside. Michael laughed, helping his father with the heavier items, and Emily offered to unpack and organize the pantry. Sam shook his head, feeling overwhelmed but grateful. For the first time, he didn't feel invisible. His quiet life, his hard work, his courage had been seen and recognized, not with accolades, but with respect and genuine gratitude. That night, as Emily and Michael sat around the modest kitchen table, Richard joined them for the first time in what felt like forever. Conversation flowed easily, laughter emerged naturally, and walls built over years of distance began to crumble. Sam realized that this day had changed more than one life. It had shifted perspectives, healed misunderstandings, and bridged a gap between worlds that had once seemed irreparably separate. Richard looked at Sam, his voice soft but sincere. "I owe you everything. And not just for saving Emily. For showing me what really matters." Sam shook his head, humility intact. You just needed to see it for yourself, Richard. That's all. As the night deepened, Emily leaned back in her chair, a smile playing across her lips. She had witnessed courage, humility, and the transformative power of selflessness. Her father, once consumed by ego, had glimpsed the humanity he had long ignored. And Sam Walker, the janitor, had proven that true heroism often comes from those who least expect recognition, acting not for glory but for love, duty, and conscience. The incident had been sudden, terrifying, and life-changing, but in its wake, it illuminated the values that endure beyond wealth, status, and pride. Humanity, compassion, and courage had taken center stage, leaving a mark on everyone involved that would never fade. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Collins penthouse, spilling across the polished floors and expensive furniture. Richard Collins sat alone at the kitchen island, a cup of coffee warming his hands but failing to chase away the weight pressing on his chest. The events of the previous day, the accident, Sam's heroism, Emily's fear, and his own guilt, played repeatedly in his mind like a relentless reel. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about deals, profits, or boardroom victories. He was thinking about people. Emily entered quietly, still in her casual clothes from volunteering the day before. Her hair was slightly messy, her cheeks flushed from exertion, and she carried a small sketchbook tucked under her arm. She looked at her father with a mixture of hope and caution. "Morning, Dad," she said softly. Richard looked up, his eyes tired but focused. "Morning, Emily," he replied, his voice gentle, almost foreign to her ears. He set down his coffee and gestured for her to sit across from him. I've been thinking a lot about yesterday. About what happened. About you. About Sam." Emily's eyes widened slightly, sensing the seriousness in her father's tone. "You mean, you're not mad I went to the fundraiser?" Richard shook his head slowly. "No. That's not it. I was wrong. About so many things. About how I've been treating you, how I've been thinking about people in general. I've been focused on money, power, and appearances, thinking they define worth. But they don't." Emily felt a swell of emotion. "Dad. I didn't expect you to say that." Richard leaned back, his fingers intertwining on the countertop. "Watching what happened yesterday, seeing Sam risk his life for you, it made me realize how blind I've been. I've been so focused on what people have, I forgot to look at who they are." Emily nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "It wasn't just about Sam. It's about kindness. About noticing people, caring for them, valuing them." Richard's throat tightened. "Yes. And I failed at that with you, Emily. I've been present in body but absent in heart. I want to change that." Emily reached across the table, placing her hand gently on his. "It's not too late, Dad. You can start now." Richard took a deep breath, feeling the sincerity in her words sink into him. "You're right. I want to be here for you, really be here." Just then, the phone rang. It was Sam, calling from his modest apartment. Richard hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello, Sam. I just wanted to check how you're feeling today." Sam smiled faintly, despite the lingering soreness in his arm and ribs. "Better, thanks. Michael's making sure I'm not overdoing anything." Richard's voice softened, full of genuine respect. "I want to do something for you, Sam. You saved my daughter's life. I don't know how to repay that." Sam shook his head, even though Richard couldn't see him. "You don't need to do anything, Richard. I did what anyone would do. But, maybe just treating people with respect, noticing them, that would mean more than anything else." Richard nodded slowly. "You're right. And I'll start there." He paused, gathering courage. "Would you allow me to take your family out to dinner? Just as a way to thank you properly?" There was silence for a moment before Sam replied, his voice cautious but warm. "We can do that. That would be nice." Richard smiled faintly, feeling the first real sense of humility he had in years. "Good. I'll arrange everything." Later that evening, Emily and Richard sat together at home, going through her sketchbook. She showed him drawings of the community center, the children, and the volunteers. Richard studied each page carefully, seeing not just her artistic talent but her perspective on the world, one that valued compassion and humanity over wealth and status. "You have an incredible eye for people," he said finally. "I want to understand the world through your eyes more often. Help me see what I've been missing." Emily's smile was radiant. "I'd love that, Dad." The following days were filled with small but meaningful changes. Richard called off unnecessary meetings, attended one of Emily's school events, and even volunteered briefly at a local charity, though he felt out of place among the people he once thought were beneath him. Each small step reminded him that true influence wasn't measured in dollars but in the lives you touched with your actions. At Sam's apartment, the Walker family prepared for dinner. Michael helped set the table, arranging plates and napkins carefully. Sam, still feeling the aches from his injuries, expressed his gratitude quietly. "I appreciate you coming, Richard," he said when the millionaire arrived at the door. Richard extended his hand, then paused, realizing a handshake wasn't enough. Instead, he hugged Sam firmly, feeling the genuine warmth of gratitude and respect pass between them. "Thank you, Sam. For everything. For your courage, and for reminding me what matters." Dinner was simple but full of conversation, laughter, and storytelling. Richard learned about Sam's daily life, his sacrifices, and his unwavering dedication to Michael. Emily observed, noticing how her father's posture and tone had softened, how he listened rather than commanded. For the first time, family and community merged, bridging a gap that seemed unfillable before. Michael, enthusiastic and proud, narrated the events of the school fundraiser in detail, animatedly describing the chaos and Sam's heroism. Richard listened, nodding and asking questions, visibly moved by the courage and selflessness he had once dismissed. By the end of the evening, Richard felt a profound transformation. The walls he had built between wealth and humanity, between ego and empathy, had begun to crumble. The realization was clear: being a good father, a decent human being, and a respectful neighbor required presence, humility, and action, not money. As he walked Emily and Michael to the door later that night, Richard reflected silently. He had learned a lesson more valuable than any business deal, any contract, any acquisition. That lesson was about the power of humility, the impact of courage, and the irreplaceable value of genuine connection. Emily hugged her father tightly. "Thank you for listening," she whispered. Richard hugged her back, holding on longer than usual. "Thank you for showing me the way." As they parted, he turned to Sam, giving him a final nod of respect. "I'll never forget what you did. And I'll do my best to honor it, every day." Sam smiled, humility intact. That's all anyone could ask for. For the first time in years, Richard felt truly connected, to his daughter, to the man he had once dismissed, and to the world beyond his wealth. In that moment, he understood that life's richest rewards came not from money, status, or control, but from courage, kindness, and the bonds forged through compassion. The following week, the city seemed different to Richard Collins. Streets he had once walked without noticing, faces and stories now felt alive with people whose lives intersected with his in ways he had ignored. He started the day early, not for meetings or negotiations, but to check on the employees in his office building. Security guards, receptionists, and even the janitorial staff, people he had previously overlooked, he greeted with genuine warmth, asking about their families, their weekends, and their well-being. "Good morning, Mrs. Lopez," he said to the receptionist who had greeted him with a curt nod in the past. "How was your daughter's recital?" Mrs. Lopez blinked, momentarily surprised, then smiled. It was wonderful, sir. Thank you for asking. Richard nodded, feeling a subtle warmth in his chest. Small gestures, he realized, carried more meaning than grand gestures of money or fame. That afternoon, he arranged to visit the community center where Emily had volunteered. She accompanied him, excited to show her father the place she had come to love. The volunteers and children recognized her immediately, but their attention shifted to Richard, who walked hesitantly through the doors, unsure of how he would be received. To his surprise, people greeted him warmly. Some nodded politely, while others, including Sam Walker, extended their hands. Richard paused before shaking Sam's hand, then added, "I want to thank you again, Sam, publicly. For everything. What you did, it changed my perspective and reminded me what life is really about." Sam's expression softened. "Thank you, Richard. I don't do it for recognition. But it means a lot that you understand." Emily beamed. "Dad, everyone is noticing your change. This is good." Richard felt a surge of humility and determination. He addressed a small gathering at the center, speaking from the heart rather than reading from a prepared speech. "I have learned a lesson that no amount of wealth could teach me," he began. "It is not money, status, or power that defines us. It is our courage, our compassion, and our willingness to act for others. Today, I want to honor someone who demonstrated these values in the most extraordinary way, Sam Walker, who saved my daughter's life." The room erupted in applause, not for Richard, but for Sam. Yet Richard felt a profound satisfaction knowing he was helping to lift Sam's quiet heroism into recognition. Later, he organized a community luncheon to support local programs, making sure that Sam and his family were central to the event. Children laughed as they received new school supplies, and parents shared stories of volunteers who had made a difference in their lives. Richard walked among them, listening carefully, engaging respectfully, and learning lessons he had long ignored. Emily watched her father with a mix of admiration and relief. For months, she had hoped he would understand, but witnessing this public acknowledgement filled her with hope. "You're really changing, Dad," she whispered. "I'm trying," he replied softly, squeezing her hand. "And it's because of you, and because of Sam, that I can see what truly matters." Even in his business dealings, Richard found subtle ways to integrate his newfound perspective. He instructed his team to implement programs that benefited employees at all levels, ensuring fair wages, recognition of hard work, and opportunities for personal growth. What had once been purely profit-driven now included an element of humanity, giving employees not just paychecks but respect and support. One evening, as he returned home, Richard reflected on how dramatically his life had shifted. The arrogance and detachment he had once relied upon were replaced with humility and connection. He understood now that leadership without empathy was hollow and that true influence came from recognizing the worth in every individual, regardless of status. Emily joined him in the study, holding a thank you note she had written for Sam. "He'll love this," she said, smiling. "You've made him feel appreciated in a way I never thought possible." Richard took the note, reading it carefully. It was simple but heartfelt, expressing gratitude for his bravery and kindness. He folded it neatly and looked at Emily. This is what life is about. Lifting others up, recognizing their efforts, and showing appreciation. The next day, Richard returned to Sam's apartment with a small gift, a token of appreciation that wasn't extravagant, but meaningful. Sam accepted it with humility, smiling as he unwrapped it. "I don't need gifts, Richard. I just needed to see that you understood the value of people." Richard nodded, feeling the truth in Sam's words resonate deeply. "I do. And I'll continue to remember it every day." Michael, who had been helping organize the apartment for dinner, looked up with pride. "Dad, you're doing more than just saying thank you. You're really showing it." Sam ruffled his son's hair. "It's amazing to see the change, isn't it? Not just in me, but in him too." Emily, seated nearby, drew quietly in her sketchbook, capturing the warmth of the family, the smiles, and the sense of connection that had blossomed from a terrifying accident. For the first time, she felt that wealth and privilege could coexist with empathy and human connection, if people chose to see beyond their ego. By evening, word of Richard's actions had spread throughout the community. Colleagues, neighbors, and even local news reporters noted the transformation. But Richard wasn't interested in praise. His focus was on integrating what he had learned into daily life, paying attention to others, expressing gratitude, and acting with compassion without expectation of reward. As the week ended, Richard sat with Emily in the living room, reflecting. "This week has been transformative," he admitted. "I see now that life is measured not by what you acquire, but by the difference you make in others' lives." Emily smiled, placing a hand on his arm. "And that difference is already visible, Dad. Look at everyone around you, Sam, Michael, the kids at the center, they see it too." Richard nodded, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. "I hope to live each day like this," he said softly. "Not just for appearances, not just for praise, but because it's the right thing to do." As night fell over the city, the Collins penthouse felt warmer, fuller, and more alive than ever before. For the first time, Richard understood that wealth alone could never satisfy the heart. True richness came from empathy, gratitude, and the courage to act selflessly. And in recognizing Sam's heroism and honoring his daughter's safety, he had discovered a deeper meaning to life, a meaning that would guide him, his family, and perhaps even his entire community from that day forward. In the days following the incident and Richard's public acknowledgement of Sam, Emily found herself reflecting more deeply on what had happened and the lessons she had learned. The experience had been intense and frightening, but it had also opened her eyes to the power of courage, empathy, and personal responsibility. Her once quiet admiration for Sam's humility now transformed into a guiding principle for her own life. At school, Emily's classmates noticed a change in her. She was more confident in speaking up, not with arrogance, but with a newfound clarity and purpose. During a group project in history class, she encouraged her peers to collaborate genuinely, emphasizing fairness and respect. Her teacher, Ms. Harper, observed her closely. "Emily, I've noticed a shift in your leadership," she said. "You're leading by example, not just by voice." Emily smiled, thinking of Sam and the community center. "Thank you, Ms. Harper," she replied. "I've realized that leadership isn't about telling people what to do, it's about inspiring them through actions and empathy." At home, she found herself more patient and understanding with her father. She could see him genuinely trying to change, making small gestures that reflected his transformation. Emily didn't expect perfection, but she appreciated his efforts. When Richard invited her to accompany him on a visit to the office building where Sam worked, she accepted eagerly. Together, they visited the staff, where Richard greeted employees warmly, acknowledging their work and listening to their stories. Emily watched, proud and inspired. "Dad," she whispered as they walked to the elevator, this is how we make a difference." Richard smiled, squeezing her hand. "Yes, Emily. And you helped me see it." Emily also spent time at the community center, volunteering alongside Sam and Michael. She discovered that true engagement meant more than showing up, it meant understanding people's needs, offering help without expecting recognition, and acting with consistency. She guided younger children in arts and crafts, listened to their stories, and shared in their laughter. One afternoon, while arranging books in the center's library, Emily reflected on her privilege. She realized that while she had advantages, her actions could bridge gaps and make meaningful impacts. The sense of purpose filled her with confidence and humility simultaneously. She didn't need recognition or praise, the smiles and gratitude of those around her were enough. Emily also noticed changes in her own circle of friends. She began encouraging them to volunteer, explaining not only the joy it brought but also the importance of understanding people's struggles firsthand. Some friends were skeptical at first, but Emily's enthusiasm and sincerity won them over. Together, They organized small drives, collected donations, and visited local families in need. At home, conversations with her father deepened. Richard shared insights from his reflections on humility, empathy, and leadership, creating a safe space for Emily to explore her own values and aspirations. She realized that change in others could inspire change in herself, and vice versa. One evening, while sketching in her room, Emily drew a series of images capturing the journey she had witnessed: Sam shielding her from danger, Richard acknowledging his mistakes, children smiling at the community center, and families coming together. Each sketch told a story of courage, compassion, and growth. It was her way of processing the events, honoring the people involved, and solidifying the lessons she wanted to carry forward. Emily's personal growth wasn't limited to the community or family. She became more thoughtful in her everyday interactions, helping a classmate struggling with homework, speaking kindly to cafeteria staff, or simply offering a smile to someone having a bad day. She noticed how these small gestures influenced others, creating ripples of kindness that extended beyond her immediate circle. During a quiet afternoon at the center, Emily spoke with Sam privately. "You've taught me so much," she said earnestly. "Not just about courage, but about humility, integrity, and noticing people's worth." Sam smiled, adjusting his sling. "You've got it, Emily. True change comes from within. And you're already demonstrating it." Emily nodded, feeling a deep sense of responsibility and inspiration. She realized that her actions, no matter how small, could influence her community and the people she cared about. She vowed to continue volunteering, learning, and leading with empathy, knowing that these choices mattered more than wealth, status, or approval. Back at home, she shared these insights with her father. Richard listened attentively, proud of her reflection and maturity. "Emily," he said, "I see that you're not just learning from me, you're teaching me too." Emily smiled, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. She understood that growth wasn't a single moment or event, it was a continuous journey of learning, acting, and reflecting. The incident had been terrifying, but it had sparked a transformation in her life that would guide her decisions, relationships, and values for years to come. As she prepared for bed that night, Emily looked out her window at the city lights twinkling below. She thought of Sam, of her father, of the children at the center, and of all the small ways kindness and courage could shape the world. She felt empowered, inspired, and deeply grateful for the lessons she had learned. In her heart, Emily knew one truth above all: true heroism wasn't defined by wealth or status, but by actions grounded in compassion, integrity, and empathy. And she resolved to live her life embodying those principles, carrying the lessons forward into every interaction, every challenge, and every choice she would make. The weekend arrived with a sense of anticipation in the small town. Word of Sam Walker's bravery had spread quickly, and the local community wanted to honor him properly. Flyers had been posted in schools, cafes, and grocery stores, inviting neighbors, friends, and families to gather at the community center. The buzz of excitement and curiosity created a lively energy, contrasting the ordinary routines of the town with a celebration that carried deep emotional significance. Emily and Michael helped prepare decorations, setting up balloons, banners, and tables of refreshments. Emily's sketches of the day before were framed and placed along the walls, capturing the story of courage, compassion, and human connection. Parents and children alike admired the images, which told the tale without a single word. Sam, though hesitant at first, agreed to attend. He wasn't used to recognition, and the attention made him uncomfortable, but he also understood that this was about more than him. It was about inspiring the community to value courage, empathy, and integrity. He dressed simply, in a clean shirt and slacks, and arrived with Michael, who was practically bouncing with excitement. Richard Collins arrived shortly after, his presence both commanding and humbled. He carried a small gift, a token of gratitude, and a speech he had spent the previous night crafting. As he stepped into the crowded hall, he noticed the faces of neighbors, families, and friends, people who had once seemed like background in his fast-paced, business-driven life. Now, they were central, and their respect and appreciation were palpable. Emily guided her father to the front, whispering, "Dad, this is your chance to show everyone what you've learned." Richard nodded, taking a deep breath. The room fell silent as he began to speak, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today, we gather not to celebrate wealth or status, but to honor true courage, the courage to act selflessly, to protect others, and to make a difference without expectation of reward. Sam Walker embodies these values. He risked his life to save my daughter, and in doing so, he reminded all of us what really matters." The crowd erupted in applause, some clapping loudly, others nodding with deep respect. Sam's cheeks flushed with humility, and he shook his head gently. "I didn't do it for recognition," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the applause. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Richard stepped closer, placing a hand on Sam's shoulder. "And for that, we owe you more than words can express. But we want to show our appreciation in every way possible, so that your example inspires others to act with courage and compassion every day." Emily beamed, proud of her father and the recognition Sam was receiving. She noticed the children in the room, their eyes wide with admiration, and the parents nodding with approval. This moment was teaching the next generation the values she had learned firsthand. The celebration continued with speeches from local officials, teachers, and neighbors, all highlighting Sam's bravery and selflessness. Stories emerged of other acts of kindness he had performed quietly over the years, unnoticed by most but remembered by those who had been touched. Each anecdote reinforced the idea that heroism wasn't measured in grand gestures but in consistent, thoughtful actions that made the world a better place. During the event, Sam's son Michael stood proudly beside him, holding his father's hand. "My dad is amazing," he whispered to Emily, his eyes shining. "I always knew it, but now everyone else knows too." Emily nodded, understanding the pride that Michael felt. She approached Sam and hugged him gently. "You're my hero," she said softly. "You saved me, and you showed me what true courage looks like." Sam smiled, his eyes misty. "Thank you, Emily. That means more to me than anything else." Richard then took the microphone again, this time speaking directly to the gathered community. "This celebration is not just about Sam," he said. "It's about recognizing the goodness in people, encouraging acts of kindness, and remembering that every one of us has the capacity to make a difference. Let Sam's actions remind us to act with integrity, courage, and compassion in our own lives." The crowd erupted into applause once more, and for the first time, Richard didn't feel the need to control the attention. He stood quietly, letting the community's admiration for Sam take center stage. He had learned that true leadership wasn't about being seen, it was about lifting others up. As the event continued, families mingled, children laughed and played, and neighbors shared stories of courage and generosity from their own lives. Sam received countless handshakes, hugs, and expressions of gratitude. He accepted them all with humility, knowing that recognition, while unusual, was not the purpose of his actions, but he was deeply moved by the community's warmth and acknowledgement. Emily took a moment to observe everything around her, the laughter, the joy, the sense of connection. She realized how much a single act of courage could ripple outward, affecting countless lives in ways that weren't immediately visible. It inspired her to continue acting with compassion and to encourage others to do the same. The highlight of the evening came when the local mayor presented Sam with a certificate of honor and a symbolic key to the city. Sam accepted both with quiet dignity, giving a brief speech. "I don't feel like a hero," he said softly, "but I am grateful to see how one act of courage can bring people together. This is about all of us, our choices, our actions, and our commitment to help one another." Richard stood beside him, feeling immense pride and gratitude. He leaned down to whisper to Emily, "I hope you remember this, Emily. This is the kind of world we can create when we choose empathy, courage, and humility over arrogance and indifference." Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'll never forget it, Dad. And I'll live by it, always." The night concluded with music, laughter, and a sense of unity. People shared food, stories, and genuine appreciation for one another. Sam and his family left the event feeling honored but grounded, their lives enriched not by fame or wealth, but by the recognition of their community and the enduring lessons of courage and humanity. Richard returned home with Emily and Michael, reflecting on the transformation that had occurred over the past weeks. The millionaire who once believed that money and status defined value now understood that true richness came from courage, kindness, and the impact one had on others. Emily curled up beside her father on the couch. "Dad," she said softly, "today showed me that even one person can make a difference. And it also showed me that we can all change for the better." Richard smiled, embracing her. "Yes, Emily. And thanks to Sam, and to you, I understand that better than ever. Life isn't about what we have, it's about what we give and the lives we touch." As the city lights twinkled outside their window, Richard, Emily, and Michael sat together, feeling the warmth of family, community, and the power of selfless courage. The celebration had not only honored Sam, but it had transformed everyone who witnessed it, leaving an indelible mark of hope, compassion, and human connection. The following week, Richard Collins felt a sense of calm he hadn't known in years. The chaos of his corporate life seemed distant now, replaced by moments of genuine connection and reflection. He spent the morning in his office, but instead of reviewing spreadsheets or strategizing mergers, he reviewed community programs, employee initiatives, and charitable projects, small ways he could make a meaningful difference. Emily entered quietly, holding her sketchbook. "Dad, can we talk?" she asked. Richard looked up, smiling warmly. "Of course, Emily. What's on your mind?" Emily sat across from him, opening her sketchbook to reveal a series of drawings capturing the journey of the past weeks, from the fundraiser, the accident, Sam's heroism, to the community celebration. Each sketch told a story of courage, humility, and the power of kindness. "Look, Dad," she said softly. "This is what I've learned. And I hope you see it too. True strength comes from helping others, from recognizing their worth, and from acting with courage and compassion." Richard studied the drawings, feeling the emotions behind each stroke. He nodded, his voice gentle. "I see it, Emily. And I understand it more than ever. You and Sam have taught me lessons no business deal or boardroom victory ever could. Life isn't about what we own, it's about the difference we make in the lives of others." Emily smiled, a mix of pride and relief in her eyes. "I'm glad you understand. And I think Sam's example has changed all of us. It showed that anyone, no matter their position, can be a hero." Later that day, Richard visited Sam's apartment to personally thank him again. Michael ran to greet him at the door, his energy contagious. "Dad! You're here," he exclaimed, holding onto his father's hand. Richard stepped inside, greeted by Sam's warm smile. "I wanted to see you one last time before I fully implement some of the changes we discussed," Richard said. "And to personally thank you for everything, Sam. You saved my daughter, and you've shown me the true meaning of courage and humility." Sam shook his head gently. "I didn't do it for recognition, Richard. But I'm glad to see that what happened has inspired you and your family. That's reward enough." Richard's eyes softened. "It's more than enough, Sam. And I hope to honor your example every day, in how I treat people, how I lead, and how I live." The conversation shifted naturally to Michael, who proudly recounted moments at school and at the community center. Richard listened attentively, asking questions and genuinely engaging. He realized that heroism and moral integrity were lessons best shared through experience, observation, and conversation, not just words. Emily joined them, sharing sketches and stories of other children at the community center who had been inspired by Sam's actions. "See, Dad," she said, "one act of courage can create a ripple effect. People start noticing, helping, and caring more because they've witnessed it firsthand." Richard nodded thoughtfully. I see it now. And I want to continue that ripple. It's not enough to just recognize courage once, I need to nurture it in others, in my family, and in the community. As the afternoon progressed, they discussed plans for ongoing initiatives, volunteering programs, mentorship for local youth, and support for underprivileged families. Richard's approach was hands-on, listening carefully, considering suggestions from Sam, Emily, and even Michael. He understood that true change came from collaboration, not directives. That evening, back at the Collins home, Richard gathered his family. I want us to reflect on what we've learned, he said. Life isn't measured by wealth, power, or control. It's measured by courage, kindness, and the impact we have on the people around us. Emily nodded. And that means recognizing the worth in everyone, even those who might seem ordinary or invisible at first. Michael added, and helping without expecting anything in return. Just doing the right thing. Richard smiled, proud of his children's understanding and insight. Exactly. That's the lesson Sam taught us all. Heroism isn't about being famous or rich, it's about integrity, compassion, and the choices we make every day. Over the next few days, Richard implemented tangible changes in his life and business. He encouraged employees to share ideas, rewarded integrity and hard work, and prioritized acts of kindness within the corporate culture. Emily continued volunteering, inspired by her father's actions and Sam's example, while Michael eagerly participated, proud of his father's transformation. One afternoon, as they sat together in the family living room, Richard reflected aloud. I've learned that humility and empathy are strengths, not weaknesses. That listening, caring, and acting selflessly are the qualities that define a person, not their bank account. Emily smiled. And you've shown that people can change. That's one of the most important lessons of all. Richard nodded, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. Yes, Emily. We can all change if we open our hearts, act with courage, and pay attention to what truly matters. Sam's bravery reminded me of that, and you reminded me of it every day. That evening, the family sat together for dinner, a simple but heartfelt meal. Conversations flowed naturally, laughter filled the room, and there was a sense of peace and connection that had been absent for years. Richard noticed how different it felt, not because of wealth or control, but because of understanding, empathy, and love. As the night deepened, Emily prepared for bed and turned to her father. Dad, I think the most important lesson I learned is that one person's courage can inspire an entire community. And that includes family. We can all choose to act with kindness and integrity. Richard embraced her. You're right, Emily. And I will strive to live by that lesson every day. Thank you for helping me see what truly matters. The story had come full circle. What began as a terrifying accident had evolved into a journey of growth, reconciliation, and moral clarity. The millionaire who once valued status over humanity had learned the enduring importance of humility, compassion, and recognition of others' worth. The young girl who had been saved now embodied the lessons of courage and empathy, inspiring her peers and family alike. And Sam Walker, the quiet hero, had shown that true valor comes not from recognition, but from selfless action and integrity. As the lights dimmed in the Collins home, Richard looked around at his family, feeling gratitude, love, and a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that the lessons learned would continue to guide him, his children, and even the broader community for years to come. Humanity, kindness, and courage had triumphed over arrogance, indifference, and ego, and in doing so, they had left an indelible mark on every life touched by the events of those transformative weeks. In that quiet moment, Richard made a silent promise to continue honoring the principles he had learned, to act with empathy, to recognize the value of every person, and to ensure that his wealth, influence, and position served the greater good. And as he drifted to sleep that night, he felt a sense of fulfillment deeper than any material possession could ever provide, a fulfillment rooted in courage, kindness, and the enduring power of human connection. Months had passed since the life-changing events that had transformed the Collins family, and the small town continued to feel the ripple effects of courage, empathy, and community spirit. Richard Collins had settled into a new rhythm, one that balanced his business responsibilities with personal growth and active involvement in the lives of those around him. The arrogance and detachment that had once defined him were replaced by a genuine sense of humility, and he had become a model for others seeking to integrate compassion into leadership. Emily thrived in school and in her volunteer work. Her confidence continued to grow, but it was tempered by humility and thoughtfulness. She took the lessons she had learned from Sam and her father and applied them daily, helping classmates, encouraging younger students, and leading initiatives that benefited her school and community. Her sketches now included more than just scenes of heroism. They captured kindness in action, empathy in everyday life, and the beauty of human connection. Michael, inspired by his father and Sam, found himself more aware of the importance of helping others. At school, he organized small charity drives with friends, collected food for local shelters, and spent time mentoring younger children in his neighborhood. He understood that even small acts of kindness, repeated consistently, could create significant change. Sam Walker's recognition had left a lasting impression on the community. He remained humble, returning to his routine with Michael, but the celebration had reinforced the values he lived by. Neighbors frequently visited, seeking guidance, sharing stories, or simply expressing gratitude. Sam's quiet courage continued to inspire those around him, proving that heroism was not defined by fame or status, but by integrity and selflessness. Richard made it a point to maintain ongoing connections with the community center. He funded programs that supported youth education, extracurricular activities, and mentorship opportunities. However, he always insisted that the focus be on empowerment and engagement rather than on financial recognition. He attended events, spoke with volunteers, and listened attentively to feedback, ensuring that his influence fostered genuine growth rather than dependency. At the Collins home, family life was filled with warmth and collaboration. Dinners were now lively conversations rather than silent routines, with each family member sharing experiences, challenges, and reflections. Richard found joy in these simple moments, realizing that connection and presence were far more valuable than material wealth. He and Emily often discussed ways to combine her creativity with community service, while Michael shared ideas for small projects that could positively impact their neighborhood. The impact of the events extended beyond the Collins household. Teachers at Emily and Michael's school noted increased compassion and collaboration among students, inspired in part by Emily's leadership and example. Local businesses and neighbors observed Richard's genuine interest in people, often commenting on how his shift in perspective had influenced corporate culture and employee morale. The town itself seemed subtly transformed, with more people volunteering, more acts of kindness, and a heightened awareness of collective responsibility. During a quiet afternoon, Richard reflected on how far he had come. Once, he had believed that influence was about wealth and power, that recognition and status defined success. Now, he understood that true influence stemmed from integrity, courage, and empathy. He remembered the fear in Emily's eyes during the accident, Sam's bravery, and the quiet strength of his own children. Each memory reinforced the enduring lesson: humanity and kindness mattered above all. Emily and Michael often reminded him that the lessons were ongoing. One evening, Emily said, "Dad, it's amazing how one act of courage and kindness can create a chain reaction. Look at all the people who have been inspired." Richard nodded. "Yes, Emily. And I see now that it's our responsibility to continue that chain. To act with integrity, to care for others, and to ensure that our actions have a positive impact." The Collins family also took annual trips to volunteer at local charities, with Richard leading efforts to organize community service days for employees and residents alike. These events became a cherished tradition, reinforcing the values of empathy, responsibility, and courage. Emily and Michael participated wholeheartedly, learning that leadership was not about control, but about inspiring and empowering others. Sam remained a constant presence in their lives. His quiet guidance, bravery, and moral clarity continued to serve as an example for both Richard and his children. He and Richard collaborated on several community initiatives, ensuring that programs were inclusive, meaningful, and accessible. Their partnership demonstrated that wealth and heroism could coexist, provided that actions were guided by humility and purpose. Years later, the town would remember the incident as a turning point, a story shared in schools, community centers, and family gatherings as an example of courage, compassion, and the transformative power of empathy. Emily's sketches, Richard's initiatives, and Sam's quiet heroism became symbols of hope, inspiring future generations to value humanity above material gain. One evening, as the Collins family sat together, Richard reflected aloud. "I never imagined that a frightening incident could change my life so profoundly. But it did. And the lesson is clear: wealth, status, and power are fleeting. The impact we have through courage, kindness, and integrity is lasting." Emily smiled. "And it's not just about big acts, Dad. Every small choice, every moment of empathy, counts. That's what I've learned." Michael chimed in, "Even helping someone quietly, without expecting recognition, makes a difference. That's the kind of heroism I want to live by." Richard embraced his children, feeling a sense of fulfillment deeper than anything he had achieved in business. "I'm proud of you both. And I'm grateful that Sam's actions and all of our experiences have reminded us what truly matters in life." As the family looked out the window at the town below, they felt a renewed sense of purpose and connection. The events had reshaped not only their own lives but the lives of countless others, demonstrating that courage, empathy, and moral integrity could create lasting, positive change. The epilogue of their story was not about accolades or material wealth, but about the enduring power of human connection, the importance of recognizing the worth of every individual, and the ripple effects of courage and compassion. The Collins family, Sam, and the community had together learned a lesson that would echo for generations: that true heroism is found in selfless acts, that change is possible at any moment, and that the values of empathy, humility, and integrity are the most precious legacies one can leave behind.